All right.
Easy breezy.
It's time to begin our Tuesday evening Bible study. Take this opportunity to welcome everyone here. Certainly do appreciate your presence, visiting with us. Debbie wants you to know how much we appreciate you being here. As always, we consider visiting to be our honored guests. We certainly want to continue to remember all of those that mentioned Sunday. That's on our sick list. I've got a couple of updates and one that I would like to add. Of course, all of you know that we've been mentioning for quite some time to Kenna Hart. Kenna is doing well at this time. But her dad, Jess Hart, has gotten a bad report. His biopsy came back and he has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And I think he also has a spot on his liver as well. And a mass on his brain. So let's please remember him. This is Ken's dad. Keep him in our prayers as well. Also, Marcel Young, her surgery went well. She had cataract surgery. All is going well with her. Thankful for that. Nelson Rickman. Sorry, Margie. I didn't pay attention.
I was going to ask you, was that on?
I forget that thing. I'm not used. But anyway, Nelson Rickman. Nelson is feeling better. Thankful for that. There may be some others that I need to mention that are overlooked. If you are, please let me know so we can make that known. Also, next Wednesday night, we're going to be giving the awards to our young people, so keep that in mind. Next Wednesday night, we following our Bible study. We will be doing that, so we'll keep that in mind as well. And also, first Sunday in June, plans are to resume our first Sunday fellowship meal. Keep that in mind, but not this Saturday, but next Saturday. I don't know what the date is. We're going to have a work day over at the fellowship meal. Got a little cleaned up and so forth that we need to do over there. But we won't try to do this weekend because it's on Mother's Day. Keep that in mind and we'll keep mentioning it. So that'll be Saturday week. The 15th. So Saturday the 15th, we'll be having a work day over at the fellowship building, clean up the building, and that kind of thing. Keep that in mind, and we'll be mentioning that again along. Is there any other announcement need to be made that I've overlooked that I mentioned? Again, happy birthday and anniversary to all those that have a birthday and anniversary in May. And Berlin forgot to make the payment to Sissy too. Okay. verses tonight. The first song will be 71. We'll secure a song in terms of that. Johnny will be leading this, he'll be leading the singing. Brother Eugene Holland has the opening prayer. Tommy, you have the closing prayer, and Phil has the invitation. Please rise.
As the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. I want you more than gold or silver, only you can satisfy. You alone are the real joy giver and the apple of my eye. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my desire, and I long to worship you.
Father, now we thank you.
Oh, well.
Thanks, worship.
How's everybody doing tonight? Doing okay? Rolling up? Maybe. That's a lot of stuff. Can't hear you. I'm just messing with you, Bob. I gotta get my shots in. Alright. So I've got that we are on page 47. Page 47, I got that we're down at the bottom of page 47. And we're supposed to be picking up in the various arrangements have been provided for us to study the Lord's Word. And what we're talking about, remember that the whole idea, the biggest theme out of all of this is we're talking about the responsibility of our local congregations. And sometimes those responsibilities, they are numerous, right? The responsibilities of a local congregation. And one thing that I think is important for us to understand is that the local congregation, it has a great responsibility. And when we think about the responsibilities of a local congregation, what are some of those responsibilities in a general overall sense? Past couple weeks, and carrying on to where we left off in COVID, we were talking about the need for the proper study of the Bible. So the local congregation does that, right? But it also reaches even further than that, right? So what else? What other things do we do as a congregation that we've mentioned here in this overall study? I'm sorry? Yeah, absolutely. We're to edify, right? We're to exhort. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay. What else? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's our job to carry the gospel into our community. Okay? What is it that Mark 16:15 says? Absolutely. Go ye into all the world. Right? So where does that start? Where does that, when we're talking about the responsibility of Freely's Chapel, where does it start? I'm sorry? Local, absolutely, yeah. It's our local responsibility. We have a responsibility to our direct community. Okay? And one of the things that we talked about before, and it's been a while, but one of the things that we talked about is making sure that we have people that are present that know this area. And one of the things that we talked about, it's been a long time, a year and a half ago, we talked about the appointment of elders in a local congregation. Okay? And we talked about that in comparison to, say, a Catholic church who they have their bishops and then their archbishops, and then what's the point in those? Like, what they do is they'll have the priest that works in the congregation, but then they've got a boss that is their bishop, right? Okay, and then so that bishop it's kind of like a district manager, right? And then they've got another boss, it's a regional manager, and that's the archbishop. And then you've got just this hierarchy of things that happen within specifically the Catholic Church, but they're not the only ones that do it. And what's the benefit there? Do the archbishops or the bishops, anything beyond that congregation, do they really do anything for the local community? They don't. And that's one of the benefits of having the eldership here at this local level. And one of the things that we talked about before was the fact that, and specifically, if we're looking at Freely's Chapel congregation here, our elders carry a huge amount of weight. Like I don't know that a lot of times when it's Bobby, it's Bobby, but and then it's Phil, and a lot of times it's just Bobby and Phil. But what's the weight that they carry? Absolutely. Absolutely. They carry the weight of this congregation. And that's such a great burden. And it's not for the faint of heart at all. So, one of the things that we need to make sure that we do is try to make life as easy as possible for these guys. And when I say that, and I'm not speaking of this congregation, but I've talked to elders in the past who people complain about even the smallest thing, like the shape of the shrubs or the color of the grass. And those are things that aren't really that necessarily important. Like, is that something, one of the things that as teachers, they talk about the world of education. And it's one that I'm relatively familiar with. And they say that it's if you are even just a elementary school teacher, or if you ever substitute in a classroom, okay, you're going to walk home, or you're going to get home, and you're going to be exhausted. And the reason because of that is they say that every teacher, every single day, they have to make hundreds of micro decisions. And it's not decisions that are just on your shoulders, but you have to decide every time somebody comes up, ask if they can go to the bathroom. Or every time that you have to decide if that comma actually goes in that spot or if it needs to be somewhere else. So you have to make hundreds of micro decisions in a day. Now, as a teacher, at the end of the day, I can leave those there. I can leave those at the school. But what about the eldership in the congregation? Every single one of those decisions, whether it's great or small, it has a bearing on that congregation. Okay, so when I say let's try to make that job as easy as possible, it's such a great commitment. Not only on them, but it's on us as well to make sure that we are doing our best to make their job as easy as possible. Yeah. Right.
I say those cities making trying to do the right thing. They keep you looking at that.
Yeah. Well, and we had conversations a year ago, or more about just the of having to decide to start to meet virtually instead of in person. And I don't know if anybody else in here had that level of conversation with these guys, but that was not a decision that was taken lightly. That was something that was talked about for days before any kind of a decision was made, and it was heavy. It was heavy on both of them. So it was not something that was taken lightly. They didn't just wake up one day and say, "Let's not meet because COVID." Their concern was making sure that this flock was going in the right direction and as safely as possible. And if that's not the thought process behind it, think about what the weight would have been on their shoulders had we met continually like we did and somebody got sick. I mean, it's such a huge burden. So, make sure, and that's really that's going to be the basis for what we're kind of talking about here today. It's making sure that we're going to talk a little bit about the eldership and what it is, how they make the decisions that they do in the congregational setting, especially when it comes to Bible stuff. So, and the reason that I set it up the way that I did was to let everybody, start to keep in mind just the level of anxiety that these guys have because of some of the decisions that are made. Okay? So let's look at this. Various arrangements have been provided for us to study the Lord's Word. Our Lord has placed elders in His church. Okay, so that really goes without saying. But let's go ahead and let's take a moment and let's look at the passages that are provided here. It says 1 Timothy chapter 3, and we're going to look at verse 1, and we're going to 7. It says, this is a faithful saying, if a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. What's the difference between a bishop and an elder? There's not one. There's no difference here. Okay? A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, and able to teach. Okay? That's really kind of the one that we're focusing on today. Is this idea of being able to teach. Number 3, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome or covetous. One who rules over his own house, well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are outside, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. So looking at some of these qualifications here, things that I think are pretty self-explanatory. You know, the husband of one wife, the temperate. What does temperate mean? Yeah, able to control their temper, right? Absolutely. They're able to control their temper. They're not one who gets mad easily, right? Okay? And as often as we make fun of Bobby, if you were not that, then we'd know it real fast, right? But, and I've met some elders who are not very temperate. Okay, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, and able to teach. Now, here's the thing. This is a checklist of things, right? Is this a list of things that we can pick and choose from? It's not. It's not. And what a lot of us we want to do is, we want to say, okay, well, I'm a good guy. Or this guy is a good guy, maybe he'd be a good elder. Okay, he's friendly. Okay, so that makes him qualified, right? But if he's not able to teach, that's what really kind of that might be the thing that sets him off, is it makes him then unqualified. And again, that I fall to that hospitable one because I've met some guys that are just really difficult to talk to. That sit in that position. Anyway, okay, so let's go ahead and let's fly back over to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 8 through 11. Ephesians 4, 8 through 11. Therefore, he says, when he ascended on high and led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. Now this, he ascended. What does it mean that he also first descended into the lower parts of the earth? Who descended is also the one who ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things, and he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers. Okay, what is the pastor here? That's not a word that we often see. It's one that the denominational world has latched onto, and they want to separate that from being an evangelist, or they want to tie those two things together, right? A lot of times, especially in our Baptist neighbors, what they want to do is they want to take that word evangelist and pastor, and they want to make it mean the same thing. But the pastor here is talking about those that are elders, or those that are bishops. Okay? And he gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, and some teachers. Okay? So the whole point of the pastor, the bishop, the elder, is to make sure that we have things in place as a congregation in order to teach everybody. Okay, that's the whole point. This is what they are trying to do. These men are responsible for feeding the flock. For feeding the flock. Okay, when a flock is fed, how many of them are fed? All of them. Yeah, they all get fed, right? Okay, let's look over real quick at Acts chapter 20 and verse 28. It says, therefore take heed to yourselves and to all the flock, among which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. So it's not just part of the flock, it's the entire flock. Okay, here it says it's very obvious that in feeding the flock, the elders cannot do all of the actual teaching. Okay? Now, here's something this is where things start to get dicey. This is where a lot of congregations run into some issues. Because people are really good at putting on a fake front. Putting on a facade. Right? People are really good at doing that. And so here, the elders, they cannot do all of the teaching. Okay? They can't. So what do? That's exactly right. They will appoint teachers. They will deem those who are best equipped to handle a certain age group. And in larger congregations, you'll have dozens of people who are able to teach. In smaller congregations, you have fewer. And so what you have to do is you have to find those that are able and willing to teach, to step up and to lead a class discussion. Okay? So thus, in the performance of their responsibility, the elders of the Lord's church set up various arrangements by which we can all study the Lord's Word. Some of these arrangements are Sunday morning Bible classes. Okay? Pretty easy. Do that every week, right? Okay? Sunday evening Bible classes. Now, this list here, it's not something that's absolutely necessary. Nothing on here is absolutely necessary. They're good ideas. And a lot of these can take shape in a variety of different ways. But so your Sunday morning Bible classes, I can remember several years ago, there was a congregation in Tupelo. And they were often considered to be a little liberal, I guess you could say, pretty easily, and say safely. And they decided to have a quote-unquote sunrise service on Easter Sunday. Okay? And basically what they did was they decided to meet in Ballard Park in Tupelo. Is there anything wrong with the elders deciding, instead of having a Bible class here on Sunday morning, that we decide to meet somewhere else and have a Bible class somewhere else? Is there anything wrong with that? There's not. Now, the issue that congregation had, and a lot of the other congregations in the area, the problem that they had with it was that it sounded really denominational. And the I guess execution of it. Now I had the elders decided, okay, this is something that we're going to do once a month, just to kind of change things up. But there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Okay. Now that said, we have this building here that was not inexpensive, and it was put here for the purpose of giving us a place to come together. Right. It just makes life a lot easier. And so that's why we have this here. There's not necessarily anything wrong with having a worship service somewhere else. Sunday evening Bible classes, Wednesday evening Bible classes. Okay, that's easy. Is there anything wrong with doing it on Tuesday? No. There's some congregations that will forego a Wednesday evening service and they'll do it on Tuesday instead. There's nothing wrong with that. Ladies' Bible classes, men's training classes, senior saints and young people's classes, gospel meetings, vacation Bible schools, various training schools and workshops. And I know that we do some of our missionary work. We do help with some of those training schools and some of those workshops. And so those things are important for the growth of not necessarily this congregation, but it's important for the growth of the church as a whole, right? Because we're reaching new audiences. The difficulty in an area like this is that on every corner in Corinth, Mississippi, you've got two different churches, two different congregations. There are other places in the world that aren't quite as saturated, and so this is a great benefit. And us being involved in that it's a great blessing. Another thing is lectureships. Being involved in lectureships. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to go to polishing the pulpit, and I think that was a great lectureship. I know that Free Hardman does some lectureships from time to time. There are other congregations locally that will have other kinds of lectureships. I mean, those are always good opportunities too. Boonville. They had one a couple years ago, and I think it's one that they do regularly. What is that one called? A couple years ago, they had the president of Freed, David Shannon. No, it's not the area-wide. Oh man, what is it? Was it the Christian Youth Conference? No, that's different. It's different. I can't remember what it's called, but I don't think they didn't do it last year because of COVID, but it's something that it's the Boonville congregation. I remember that because I had to ask me to read scripture. I can't remember what the event was called, but yeah. As I was driving through Corinth just a little while ago, I saw a sign for East Corinth. Is that congregation still active at all? I know West Corinth it is, but I don't ever hear it is. Okay. I very rarely hear anything out of East Corinth. Okay. So any comments or questions about the role of the eldership and the work that goes on in setting up of different methods of training? Any other ideas? We have an elder in here, and he's not really difficult to get along with. So if you have any ideas, it's not a bad opportunity to throw some stuff at it. Not literally.
Yeah, he's talking. Yeah. Something that's said that way. Most of the time, everybody they same direction. I said, church of people are all studying the same line. Both lead the same way.
Yeah.
But for the city congregation of the autonomous, this congregation leadership here, we answer to God.
Yeah.
We don't answer to like I don't know, hope or something. And hey, all the other congregations the same way.
Right.
Leadership answers to God.
Yeah.
And the thinking behind that is that you can still have a bad apple in the team, but everything's all promise. It's not about to bring down the entire church. It's needed that everybody's answer somewhat on earth.
Right. Well, that's an excellent point too. You know, the way that it's set up through Scripture is that every congregation is autonomous, right? Okay, this is the word that you use. That means that we can move and we can do things that we feel are necessary without answering to someone else. We are self-sufficient as a congregation. Okay, and that is really important because it was a couple of years ago. Was it Acton that had some issues within the congregation, right? And how did that really affect us? It didn't. And the reason that it didn't is because we, as a congregation, we can stand on our own, right? And that's an excellent point, Bob. Especially when we talk about that in comparison to how many times do we have to turn on the news and we hear about a bishop doing something not very good? And what does that do? What does it do for who does it make look bad? Exactly. That denomination, right? That faith. It makes that entire faith look bad, right? Okay, so that's important. Now let's say somebody here does something dumb, okay? This congregation here has to deal with it. Okay, does any other congregation have to deal with it? We don't. They don't. And that's the whole point. And that's why when, let's say that if you had somebody that was teaching a Bible class and they were teaching something that was not accurate, then here the elders in that congregation that can deal with it. And it's not something that should affect any other congregation. I can remember several years ago there was a split of a congregation in Tupelo, and it was over something it actually had to do with the eldership, because people were questioning the qualifications of the elders. Basically, what they wanted was they wanted to put women in positions of authority. Was a big part of it. Most of them ended up going to that congregation that ended up doing sunrise service, but I commend the elders of that congregation for the way that they handled that situation, even though it was an extremely difficult situation. But they had to stick with what Scripture says, and they didn't budge, and because of that, they had their name really kind of dragged through the mud for a little while. But that did not really affect any of the other neighboring congregations. The only thing that you might have seen was, okay, let's say that somebody's here and there's another split for whatever reason, and that family decides, okay, we're going to go to East Corinth, because we can talk about that. Okay, so you might see some growth in other congregations, but for the most part, you don't see anything else. Number 3, it says we need to avail ourselves to the opportunities provided to study the Lord's Word. What does that mean? That we need to avail ourselves. Yeah, I mean, that's easy, right? Okay, that wasn't a trick question. No, we need to make ourselves available. Okay, one of the most difficult things and we've talked about this before, is sometimes, especially on a Wednesday night Bible class, we may not feel like it. We may have had a difficult time at work, and we're dragging. But then when it comes time to get up and to go, we get up and we go. And what is the result? Oftentimes we feel better about it by the time that it's over with. And a big part of that was because we were able to get into the Word, to study it, to learn, to have fellowship. And so we need to make sure that we make ourselves available for those opportunities provided to study the Lord's Word. And that's, well, I was going to chase a rabbit. I'm not going to chase that rabbit. Okay, number 1. It says we need to attend Bible classes because it is a rewarding privilege. Now, one of the things that I think that our society has started to get a bit confused is this idea of a right versus privilege. What is it? Like, okay, so there are people who really push the idea that healthcare needs to be provided by the government because it's our right to have it. That makes sense. Now, granted, I will say this: medicine is way too expensive. There needs to be some sort of a regulation there. But aside from that, it's. What about, like, doctor? Does the doctor have a right to make a living? That's a right. You have a right to get a job. Okay? But that's not something that's necessarily going to be provided. And so when we have a congregation like this, what is our Bible study? It's a privilege. It's a privilege. Well, it is, but at the same time, there's a fine line there, because there's divine privilege.
Privilege is something we hope to without fear.
Right.
Back, we're guaranteed to back. Just believe under our Constitution.
Right. And we do need to be careful in those definitions, because there's a fine line. Rights are something that we have, that we can do. Privileges are things that we can take advantage of. Right? And we have the privilege here. We have the choice. We have free will. So this Bible study, it is a privilege for us to come together to study, so that we can do what? I'm sorry? Yeah, so that we can in turn spread the gospel. All right, very good. People do not always have the privilege. Okay, so let's think about, here's a good example. Let's say that you live in a place that's more rural than here. Okay, and it's not an easy drive to get to a local congregation. Right? There you have a right, but you don't have the privilege. Right? So not everybody always has a privilege. So if you have the ability to go to Bible class, take advantage of that privilege, because it's right there in front of you.
Thinking down 17, this is all one candidate, 17 congregations to serve. 17 listed all. But we kind of stay in Mississippi. That does not have congregation to serve.
Okay.
So you stay in the city, doesn't have.
Okay. So Randy said there's 82 counties in Mississippi. Okay. So but we don't know how many of those do not have a congregation, right? So
I'd say it's something like, I remember about something like 20 something counties, now that 82. It is not even have congregation. Here in all counties, we're fortunate we got 7, we did have 21.
we're privileged enough to have it.
Got 17.
Right. Yeah.
That's our own county.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think you're wrong, you're correct. I do not think they can be as
Wrong. I don't know.
I don't think it does. I think it can.
I know there's East Main, there's Lee Acres, there's Gloucester, there's West Main, there's Skyline, there's Edwardsville, Mayfield, Verona. Another one. Trying to think. So I can think of 9 right off the top. Yeah, this is a good bit, right? Yeah. So this is an excellent point.
Thanks, sir.
Taylorville. Taylorville.
Really? Well, that's good. Well, and that's part of the mission work of a congregation, right?
This work is not necessarily overseen.
Oh yeah, no doubt. All right, I will not be here next Wednesday. I'm going next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to visit with my grandmother, who is in Georgia. I haven't seen her in a while, and she's the only one left, so I feel like I need to go see her when I can. So that'll be the 12th, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'll be driving back Saturday. So we'll pick up here on the 19th, okay, number 3 on page 48. Good deal. Good class.
Our invitation song is 736. 736. 736. Talk to everybody just a minute. How to make a friend. It's going to come out of Samuel. Book of Samuel. Talk about Jonathan and David. Talk about Jonathan made David swear to him by his love, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. 1 Samuel 20:17. Everyone needs a friend like Jonathan. Jonathan knew David was going to sit on the throne instead of him, but that didn't matter to him. Jonathan would live and die for David, even if it meant opposing his own father. You have a friend like that, kind that would live and die for you. Have a friend like that, you must be a friend like that. Proverbs 18:24. What does that mean? It means you deny yourself. It means you give yourself to that person, expecting nothing in return. It means you rejoice in their triumph, mourn over their failures. It means you drop everything when they need it. It means you seek their happiness above your own. It means you bear and believe and hope. It means you forgive again and again, as long as it takes to get right. Friendships like David and Jonathan don't just happen. They are born of hardship, struggle, through battles fought together side by side. They are developed from years of faithful, steady, dependable investment in each other. A friendship like this is costly, but once you have it, you will not trade it for anything. How much did David love Jonathan? And Jonathan wanted to know that David would fulfill his vow to him. He asked him to swear by something he had learned. He could always believe in David's own love for him. Do you have a friend like this? Are you a friend like this? God, thank you for being this kind of friend, for being our best friend, helping us to return your love by loving others as you have loved us. Is anyone here tonight that needs to come forward and anybody in the church in a seat? Please come and stand and sing.
First section, fourth verse, 9:36. I've wandered far away from God. Now I'm coming home. The path of sin too long I've trod. Lord, I'm coming home. Coming home. Coming home. Never more to roam. Oh, my down south. Lord, I'm coming home. I've wasted many precious years. Now I'm coming home. I now repent with liberty. Lord, I'm coming home. Coming home. Coming home. Never more to roam. Oh, by thine arms of love. Lord, I'm coming home. My soul is sick, my for coming out tonight, especially if you're visiting with us or on our guests and ask to come back anytime. Does anybody have any other announcements? Thank you. If not, Brother Tommy Case, addition.
Father, have come to this time, once again, to thank you for this beautiful day. Spare our lives, and our word. We're thankful for the word of prayer, great praise, possible do. Thankful for Brother John, and his thoughts, lesson tonight. Also thankful for all the teachers, they will, one another, which are going to. Thankful for the elders that we have here, that they may congregation, that way they. It should be if they're sick, basically wants to mention here tonight at church, that they may soon return to their normal life. We have to continue to be with us each and every day before our lives, your influence others, we may be pleasing with it. Basically, Father, thank you for sending your Son out on this cross, on this earth, we may someday go home with thee. Yes, we're thankful that we come here. Say that word. Basically, think one else, we do fall short of thee and sin. Let us make both strong in our word, may be strong and even influence others. Now, if we go to our homes and schools, this may turn home safely each and every night. Be with us till we meet the inside.
Amen.
Thank you.